You're listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at No Schedule Man on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /No Schedule Man. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
Hi, I'm Kevin Bulmer. Welcome to the show. I'm really glad you're here, and I hope you can take something positive away from it. If you do, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, or review the podcast. That really helps out. Jump on my email list if you haven't already. You can find that at noscheduleman.com on the upper right-hand side, along with all my social media channel links. Please do reach out. I'd love to hear from you. On a quick housekeeping note, I've been in the process of switching the platforms, the host of this podcast, and ultimately looking to tweak the name and the logo of it. That's coming up in the next few weeks, I hope. As I go through that, I expect there will be a period of a few weeks where not everything is going to line up exactly in terms of what it all says and some of the links and things like that. In short, to explain it, I'm switching the main hosting from SoundCloud to another platform that should significantly increase the distribution and effectiveness of future episodes. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Now, that's not a comment in any way against SoundCloud. When I started this podcast back in January of 2016, all I was really interested in doing at the time was maybe one episode a month, and then trying to figure out how to get it on iTunes. So at that time, all I did was a little bit of Googling. I really didn't know what I was doing, and when I discovered that SoundCloud could send a feed up to iTunes, I thought, well, that's great. I already have a SoundCloud account for my music. I'll just upgrade that, and I'll use that. Well over a year later, having become much more educated about the world of podcasting, I found out that there are much better ways to do it. And since I know that this is something that I'm going to be committed to for a great long while yet, I've decided to invest some time and money into the infrastructure and the distribution of the show. That just means I'm going to have to go back and adjust some of the links and update the introduction voice of my friend Derek Bottenoff at the beginning. And you may just notice some things that don't line up over the next few weeks, but it'll take me some time to get it all tidied. So I'm not sure whether I should be putting this particular episode on SoundCloud or not, because I have it redirected. But iTunes will continue to be the main place, or, of course, all of the episodes can be found on my website at kevinbulmer.com. noscheduleman.com will take you to the same place. And anyway, if you're hearing this, well, you clearly have already found the show. So let's get on with it. Today we're exploring the journey of Amanda Weber. Amanda is affectionately known as a happiness coach. She helps people discover their happiest, healthiest, and most successful version of themselves amid often chaotic nature of life, or the often chaotic nature of life, through one-on-one coaching, group workshops, and speaking, as well as through her blog and a podcast that she has, which is called The Full Life. Amanda helps bring clarity and perspective to those with whom she interacts. Now, Amanda knows from experience what it's like to arrive at a certain point in your life, stressed out, unhappy, and waking up at 3 a.m. feeling like there must be something more to life. An inherent, and what she says is recovering, people pleaser, Amanda had to embark upon a journey of self-discovery, which she sometimes had to do against her initial instincts in order to find peace of mind and joy for herself. She tells a story with remarkable clarity and honesty in this conversation. I'm really sure that you're going to enjoy it. Now, I know all kinds of people whose default operating system is set to people-pleasing. They can't say no. And there's a certain level of that which is noble and helpful, especially in a world where so many are bringing this air of entitlement and expectation of instant gratification. And what ends up happening is that those who are only too willing to pass the buck, they leave the messes for the people pleasers to clean up. Now, when that happens, the pleasers swoop in and engage in that, trying to be good, but that sometimes works out to their own detriment. You can only take 100% responsibility for your own experience. Taking more than that, it's enabling others and really throwing yourself out of integrity and alignment. Taking less is, of course, being a victim. And while the people pleasers don't completely realize it by overdoing it, they're both throwing themselves out of integrity and enabling, in a certain sense, the behavior of others. I've done this in periods of my life. I think to a certain extent we all have, if we're engaging in discussions like this. It's not an easy thing to overcome, but as evidenced by Amanda's experience, it can be done. Some of the key points I took away from my time with Amanda Weber include, number one, taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others. She tells a story of how she would deplete herself and then how that would affect her kids, and the 3 a.m. promise that she made to stop being reactive with her kids, and then what happened a little while after that. It's a fantastic story. Have a listen for that. Another one that she tells is about a woman that she would observe going off to yoga each morning and then returning to a busy house full of kids baking muffins in the afternoon, and how Amanda used to judge her but then finally realized, she was giving to herself with the yoga in the morning so she could give back to the kids in the afternoon. But she tells a more complete version of that story in our conversation, and I hope that you'll listen to that. Number two, sometimes life gets away. This happens to a lot of us without realizing it. It certainly happened to me. If you don't stop to consider where you're going and why, life will carry you along on its own. And, as you may have experienced, it won't always take you to where you'd like to go. As Amanda says, quote, I think life kind of got away on me. I got to that first job, and it led to the second, and it led to the third. And the more that I people-pleased and got stuff done, the more the next best opportunity would come. And so I think life kind of took me somewhere versus me deciding when and where I would go. And I'm not sure that it lines up at all with the person that I started out as. Does that sound familiar? It certainly sounds familiar for me. Have a listen to that. Life gets away. If you're recognizing that in yourself, I guess the next question is, where would you like for it to be going, and what are some of the steps that you can take toward making that happen? Number three, recognizing adversity as opportunity. She tells a story, and it's quick, but she mentions about how she's so grateful to her husband for leaving her. Married, I think it was 17 years. She mentions this in the conversation, but how she never would have left, and that her husband gave her a, quote, thankless gift. I've been through a marriage dissolving. Maybe you have, or know someone who has, or certainly has been through, or have been through a relationship going away. It's tough. It hurts. It is adversity. But if you can look at that and other kinds of things as opportunity, maybe even not so much in the moment, but when you can reflect back on how maybe you have changed as a result, there's always a choice, whether you want to take the high road and keep it positive or carry those really bad feelings with you. And Amanda gives us a great example. I think you're going to absolutely love her. I loved talking to her. This is the conversation with Amanda Weber, the happiness coach, on the No Schedule Man podcast. Amanda, tell me about what, to quote something that you've written on your website, life coming to a screeching halt looks and feels like.
Yes. Okay. In truth to my own coaching, I'm taking a little bit of a deep breath, because even to hear you say that sort of brings a constriction to my chest.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, I think it's, for me anyway, and it's been a really critical part of my journey, it's that moment where you realize that things have just gotten so out of balance that you have to do something. You can't sort of do the suck it up any longer, because it's not going to get you out of this scenario. And for me, that happened when, I've always been kind of a high energy, love to be busy kind of person. And so sometimes I think if you're inclined that way, you can mask the craziness in, I'm just busy and I love it. But for me, I had this critical time where my marriage of 17 years ended, and I had 2 young boys to raise on my own. My dad was terminally ill. And the company that I worked for in my career, which I highly identified with, it wasn't sort of what you would think as being a bad stress, like potentially the first two scenarios were, it was actually a great stress. The company was doing an initial public offering on two major stock exchanges. And as the VP of communications, I was getting to participate in that in a way that anybody doing what I did for a living would have dreamed of getting the opportunity to do, but still very high stress. And the screeching halt was really, that waking up at 3 a.m. and realizing that this stuff looks like it's okay on paper, but in your heart, you just know that it's not, and you have to stop and do something. You just can't go on the way you're going.
That's a lot of heaviness. How did they... This seems unfair to ask. Well, I'm asking it in my mind before I say it to you. But what I was going to say was, which of them ranked where? You're losing your dad. You're losing your husband. Work is certainly busy. You're thinking about what the future is going to look like for your kids and for you. I don't even like the question, but I've started us down this path, so I'm going to finish it, Amanda. But I'm interested about going up to that time, or what were the ones, not that ranked the heaviest, but that you began to kind of notice first in terms of the weight that they were adding to your experience?
It's funny. If I'd asked this question to myself, I'm not sure I would have answered it this way. But as you're asking me, I just had kind of a real-time moment of clarity in that the thing that seemed to be taking the lead was that amongst each of those things, I was losing myself. I had literally spent so much time trying to take care of everyone else and everything else that I didn't know how to take care of myself. And that's why I wasn't showing up in the world in a way that was nourishing to me or the people that I loved. So if that answers your question, I think the thing that was taking the precedence was the thing that was waking me up at 3 a.m. was that I wasn't taking care of myself. And so I was no good to anybody else.
I'm guessing in a lot of the work that you've done since that time, Amanda, you've tracked things back and sort of unpacked some previous experience and built some awareness. What's your best guess in terms of where that process, like if I can look at that as the period at the end of the sentence, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with all of the circumstances that you describe, and you finally realize something that you didn't have the awareness of all the way up to that point, I'm losing myself. Where then is your best guess in terms of where that process actually began?
Of losing myself?
Yeah.
Wow. I have spent a great deal of time and worked with a lot of great processes and some really great coaches to kind of keep peeling back the layers, if you will. That's kind of maybe a cliche analogy, but peeling back the layers of the onion, where as a layer comes back, more comes up. But if I really look back, even as far back as I can remember, I have always been that sort of archetype of a caregiver, where I was always concerned about how everybody else was doing and and I really defined my self-worth by how well I could take care of others. And I think the paradox maybe of that is that taking care of myself was something that I deemed to be selfish, and yet taking care of others kind of fed my self-worth, if you will. And, that happened way, way back when I was probably 2 or 3. I had 2 older brothers. We just immigrated to Canada. And my parents made this incredibly compassionate decision that they were going to adopt a child. And so we adopted my sister, and she had some health challenges. And so she became the focus for quite a bit of time for my parents. And what I found was that if I could jump hoops taking care of things and people pleasing around that I could get noticed. And that's some pretty heavy stuff that I never ever realized till quite a bit later. But that's really where it all started. It just kind of built from there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Amanda.
No.
So coming up to, we're back at the point where we started, when you sort of arrived at that point of just realizing, okay, I'm losing myself. Something needs to change. I might not necessarily know what that is. You probably didn't at that point, but something. What was going on in your professional life? What more can you tell me about your career and how you were showing up there?
This is such a great question. And I hope that anyone listening to this can maybe connect with this, and maybe you can too. I was really the master of showing up at work and doing everything, making sure everything got done. If people needed something to get done at the last minute, they would just come and find me because they knew that I would get it done. And in fact, I remember this, we were doing a big event at my work, and some people needed VIP passes for access to certain areas to facilitate the event. And my team did all the events, and somebody left my VIP badge on my desk, and where my name was supposed to be, they had, instead of putting my name in, they had written in, "Get stuff done, Weber." They didn't say stuff. They said another S word, but I'll let you fill in the blank. And I looked at that and thought, you're darn right. You want something done, you come find me. I'll get it done no matter what the sacrifice. And I really wore that like a badge of honor, and that's how I showed up at work. So people would have said that I was highly together, very efficient, always reliable. And yet that was totally a persona, because I would go home and kind of step in the front door of my house and fall apart.
Can I ask you what kind of work you were doing? Like what
Sure.
The career field, I mean.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I worked in the technology sector. So if you imagine the company that I worked for made network equipment. So right from the early days of the internet, we were really building the equipment that the big service providers like Rogers and those kind of folks in Canada, yet in the US and all over the world, we were helping them build out the infrastructure of their networks. And although I don't have a technology background, I come from a family of engineers, and I'm a marketing person, so I'm very much wired differently than engineers. So it was kind of a common ground that my dad said, well, if you can't be an engineer, if you can market for a technology company, then that's a pretty good compromise. And we would sort of giggle about that. But yeah, so that was the field I was in. So it's quite male dominated, very fast pace. Very much, you get a round of venture capital funds in, and you had to get your product to market before that ran out. So it's quite high pressure.
When you were going through the years earlier in your life, Amanda, post-secondary or secondary and maybe into post-secondary, or just that time when we're starting to kind of formulate the ideas of, at least at that point in our journey, who we think we're going to be and what we think we want to do. And unfortunately, many of us make the mistake, I see it as a mistake now, of thinking that the two are the same thing. They can be, but now I'm getting ahead of us. But how did what you were doing at that point, how did it line up, if at all, with that idea from when you were younger of what you thought your life might look like or wanted it to?
Yeah, that's, it actually, it feels like it doesn't really, to be honest, because when I was younger, if one of my friends skinned their knee, I showed up with a Band-Aid. If somebody needed someone to talk to, I would have a listening ear. And so I don't think I would have thought that I would have ended up where I would have ended up. It probably wasn't very well aligned, but I think life kind of got away on me. I graduated from college with a business marketing and public relations sort of background. And I got that first job, and it led to the second, and it led to the third. And the more that I people pleased and got stuff done, the more the next best opportunity would come. And so I think life kind of took me somewhere versus me deciding where I would go. And I'm not sure it lines up at all with that little person that I started out as.
At what point in your journey, and with, if you can describe kind of the environment, did the relationship start that became your marriage of 17 years? Where did that start?
Wow. You're getting into all the good stuff.
I don't want to waste your time, Amanda.
Do I pay you? Like, is this a counseling session and I'll pay you afterwards?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to pay me, but that's, I mean, yes, I need to put a value on myself.
Oh, yeah. No, that's so good.
No,
that's
I'm
so
curious, and I'm, like so many other people are, I'm holding myself back from interjecting my own stories because I want to hear about yours, but I'm taking everything that you're telling me and reflecting on my own experiences as well. So the way that you answered the last question has me reflecting on that part of my journey and what it led to, and the question that I just asked you was also in the backdrop of my mind of how my marriage, where that started and what was going on with me. So I guess I'm being selfish a little bit here, curious about how that developed and when. But back to the question: when was it and what was going on that you two met?
Yeah, so it's I think it's really interesting. It happened in high school, and a friend of mine says almost the same story, and it's probably why I love her so much. But with all due respect to the person that I was married to, who I will love my entire life, he was broken, and I said, "Great, I can fix. We're perfect." And it was at an age where we were, probably young and didn't really have a great sense of who we were. At the time you think you do, but then later you sort of have more once you've had an opportunity to discover yourself in different scenarios. And I think it was, I came into it as a people pleaser at a time in high school when, you just want to be loved and accepted by everybody. And that I really entered into that marriage to be a people pleaser and a fixer. And those are probably the two worst things that you can enter into a marriage with. But being authentic, I had the best intentions. I truly did.
At what point along that path did you start to get things were going in a direction that might not be recoverable?
Well, I think part of being a people pleaser is that as long as you are in that space, you do not even see that coming. It's not even an option. Failure is not an option. You just keep working harder and harder and harder. And in fairness, my ex-husband was the person who decided to leave, and he literally could not have given me a more thankless gift, because I never would have left. I would never have allowed myself to leave. And by him leaving, he really gave me the opportunity to start to figure out who I was. And I'm eternally grateful to him for doing that.
When you get back then to that point where we started the conversation of I'm losing myself, I'm waking up at 3 a.m., my dad is terminally ill, the marriage is ending, things just seem chaotic. You've now painted part of the picture of the backstory for us, Amanda, and thank you for that, to give some context to the operating system that had taken you all the way through all of those phases of your life. So basically the whole infrastructure of the house that was your life and personality, you arrive at a point where all of a sudden you push a button that says, not okay. So the first thing is to be able, in my mind, is to be able to make that, put that label on it or make that statement and accept that. But then comes, now what? And if you arrive at that point that you've described with that paradigm that you've described, my guess is that you're not really immediately equipped to be able to come up with a really actionable, powerful, long-term strategy to answer that question of now what? So I'm curious about, A, how fair that is to say, and if it's fair at all, what then did you do next? Yeah,
so, well, the one thing that I did was I sort of made I remember distinctly the night I made a 3 a.m. promise to myself that one of the behaviors that I had gotten into the habit of doing that I was not proud of and that really bothered me is getting reactive with my kids. And so at that time, my boys would have been probably 9 and 12, I think. And I had this cycle where I would deplete myself, people pleasing all day long. And I would come home, and as soon as I stepped over the front door into my comfort zone, I would just be so reactive with them. And, they have been my greatest life lesson teachers. And this was one of the lessons where I would walk in the door, their backpacks would be there. I joke, the empty boxes of pizza pockets because they'd come home hungry. And I would start, why didn't you hang up your backpacks? Why are you guys eating junk after school when you know I'm going to come home and make dinner? And they would kind of retreat to their rooms or whatever to sort of escape my wrath until dinner was made. And, we're very vocal about our love for each other. We would have dinner, and before they went to bed, I'd read them a story and sit with them, and they'd say, Mom, I love you. And I'd say, honey, I love you too. And get up the next day and we do it all over again. And so that was becoming sort of a theme, if you will. And so when I made that 3 a.m. promise, it wasn't really to take care of myself. The 3 a.m. promise was to stop being reactive with my kids, which it turned out the only way that was going to happen was if I started to take care of myself. Because I didn't realize that my reactivity was a result of me giving everybody else what I needed to be giving myself. And that was some love, some self-care, some honoring. And so the 3 a.m. promise was to stop being reactive with my kids. But the tool that I went looking for, as maybe many of us do, is I went to Chapters to look for a book. I'm like, surely a book can solve my life for me.
Yep.
And can I keep going? Because this is kind of an interesting story.
Please, absolutely.
Okay, so I went to Chapters, and I was hanging out with the books, and I found this book called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. And I was kind of looking at it, and some of the things were just jumping off the pages to me. And, I was never into yoga or spirituality or really any of that kind of stuff. But this was really speaking to me. And I flipped to the back of the book, and it said, the Chopra Center for Wellbeing, Carlsbad, California. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where I need to go. And it was so unlike me to do anything for myself. And I'm not even sure who I was able to get to look after my kids, but I made this crazy decision to get on a plane and go to the Chopra Center for a week and learn how to take care of myself. And that was really the beginning of it. It's a bit extreme, but extreme bad behavior on my part called for extreme measures to intervene and start to fix stuff.
How long was it from the time that you took that action and quote, hung out with the books? I love that. I wrote that down when you said it. From that time to actually arriving in California at the Chopra Center.
Oh, I think honestly, it was about 2.5 or 3 weeks.
Really?
It was insanely fast because they had a website, and I jumped on the website, and it said that they had this 1 week kind of immersion in yoga and meditation and Ayurveda, which is sort of the science of life and very clean eating. And it was coming up in a few weeks, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening now. I've got to do this. And I still remember filling the form out and hitting the send button and thinking, have you completely taken leave of your senses? You do not do things for yourself. This is so selfish. And it hurt. It really did. But at the same time, I thought I have to do something. Some people jump out of planes for a thrill. I do these random acts of self-care, and it's terrifying.
Tell me more about that. You said it hurt. What does that mean?
It's kind of like, if you'd asked me at that time, so that's probably maybe between 8 and 10 years ago, if you'd asked me then, Do you yell at your kids? I would go, oh my gosh, no. Who yells at their kids? That's so bad. Because I would have been like really embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed to admit that I yelled at my kids. I say it now, and I don't like that I raised my voice to them, but I don't have shame associated with it anymore. I think the pain is shame. It's shame that you're doing things that you know aren't in your best and highest good and that aren't really who you are. And the pain is not, it's like an internal pain of, why are you not taking care of yourself? When are you going to show up and take care of yourself the way that you take care of others? I think that's what the pain was, versus like a physical pain, which arguably would be so much easier to take care of.
A lot of the things that you mentioned, well, I say a lot, you only mentioned a few of the things: meditation, yoga, Ayurveda. Those were not necessarily fundamental pieces of your experience going forward, or not going forward, but up to that point. You weren't. It didn't sound to me like you were into meditation and yoga and these kinds of things, were you?
You know, I truly wasn't, and I actually have a really funny story on that. If I can go down this path,
please.
There was I would be at home with the two boys, and it was just the three of us. And I had this Wonder Woman cape on that was unbelievable. Like, I could just get so much done, and I'd be whipping around like a martyr. Oh, no, I'm fine. Right. And I'm getting stuff done. And there was a woman across the street from me. And on a Saturday morning, I used to see the sitter come over to watch her son, and I would see her fling her yoga mat over her shoulder and head off to yoga class. And I'm like, man, that is so self-indulgent. And I might have added a couple more adjectives too, but only in my head.
Okay.
And then this same person, in the afternoon, she would have all the neighborhood kids over to bake muffins and make a complete disaster of her kitchen. And she would have so much patience. And once again, I'd be saying, who is she to have all that patience? I can't believe this. And it took me so long to realize that she spent the morning taking care of herself and filling her bucket, if you will, with patience and resilience and self-care. And then in the afternoon, she was able to give it back in a way that I just wished I could have. And so she really was playing out a perfect lesson for me. And rather than looking at her going, oh, it's so wonderful, she's caring for herself, and then she's having a wonderful time with her kids. Instead of seeing it that way, I was just angry at her. I've since gone back and apologized to her for thinking that. And she's just like, yeah, I don't really have any idea what you're talking about.
You write, well, you've written somewhere on your website, I remember reading something about your idea of some of these things. I'll call it self-care, meditation, yoga, and some of the others. That literally made me laugh out loud when I read it, because I saw so much of myself in it, and have admitted on this show to others, and will many more times, that if the current version of me could go back and stand in front of the 5, 6, 10, 15 year ago version of me, that former one from long ago would look at me now and go, what the hell is up with you? You up there with the cloud huggers and your little positive affirmations and you're stretching.
So
and because I'm like, that's for kooks that live in the clouds. And yet, turns out the kooks knew what they were doing. Anyway, I just... so
true.
The picture that I'm trying to paint here is that when you had that electric jolt, which was completely... different, I guess, for want of a better word, that told you, like, different from any message that you had been giving yourself up to that point, that said, here's this Chopra Center in Carlsbad, California, you have to go. These are the things that you're going to be exploring and doing.
Yeah.
They weren't part of your previous experience. Quite to the contrary, you had seen them and actually, I'll say, judged them.
Oh,
But,
no. Is that what I did?
well,
That's totally what I did, Kevin. That's complete. I like the judging was unbelievable.
yeah, and yet you had that electric reaction that said you have to go. You've got to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's where I guess the confusion comes in. So what happens next after making that leap?
Well, what was interesting was I went and it was amazing. You know, I connected with lots of other people that were just like me. I connected with lots of people that had been really rocking, taking care of themselves for years. But then you come back, right? And life kind of gets back to normal. You know, I come back and it turns out my dad's still terminally ill, which was no shock. It comes back and it turns out that I'm still a single mom with 2 kids broaching on teenage years. That didn't go away. I come back and my job's still there. But there's this kind of underlying, I've experienced something, not like rainbows and unicorns and pixie dust and all this kind of my life has changed forever. It's a very subtle knowingness that there is something other than what I've been doing. And so I think I just sort of, you know, I came back and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to keep doing this meditation thing. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it was a one shot deal and now I'm just going to be great forever. But I remember, and I talk about this on my website, I remember the day that I came in the front door and my 2 boys were waiting there. And I'm sure they won't mind me telling this story. It's too late now because I'm telling it anyway. And they looked at me and they said, "We need to talk to you." And I said, okay. And I think, you know, if you have kids, especially if you have young boys, when they need to talk to you, it's only one of 2 things. Either they've broken something or they'd like to break something and they're just asking for your blessing to break it.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, kind of defeated. I'm like, okay, what's up? And they said, "We just want to know if you're doing some kind of science experiment because we noticed that you're not yelling at us anymore." And I said, "Oh, yeah, about that. I really had figured out that wasn't working for us." And I got a little bit emotional and I could tell these two little pairs of eyes are looking at me like, do we stay or do we just leave right now? And they just left, which was probably the best thing for them to do because I went into the bathroom and cried my eyes out for about half an hour.
What age were they at that time, Amanda?
Oh, like they might have been, I guess, maybe 9 and 10, like 9 and 12 or 10 and 13, maybe like in and around that age. And I mean, that was the whole reason I went, was to stop yelling at them. And I hadn't even realized that had been sort of an early consequence, was that this idea that I was more present when coming in the door and I was breathing coming in the door literally was making me a different person. But it wasn't a different person. It was that person that I was starting to uncover, that person that I'd lost so many years ago. The person who was carefree and happy and wanted, you know, to feel good and help others to feel good. That was starting in a very authentic way to come back, not in the people-pleasing way.
How long after you were at the Chopra Center did that conversation take place?
Oh, it was maybe a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks at most after I came back, because I think they had really noticed something different. And it was not long after, but I'll tell you, it was literally that day, then and there, that I have meditated every day since then. Because when somebody gives you a taste of you showing up in an authentic way, I just guard that with my life now. That they were gracious enough to hold me through that space of realizing what I needed to do to be a better me. And I know that's a really critical part of my self-care, is having that time and stillness each day. Some days it looks different than others because it can't always look the same, but that's a really critical piece of my self-care.
I want to haul you backwards just a little bit, if you'll let me.
Yeah.
Take me back to the Chopra Center, and again with the backdrop in mind of, yes, you had made the decision and sort of honored that intuition to take the bold and what I think is an almost heroic act to go. But it sounds to me like you were in a very fragile place and going to explore some things that you knew very little about or had not up to that point really embraced or maybe understood. And now suddenly you're in an environment where I'm only guessing, Amanda, that there must have been some people that were in a situation maybe somewhat similar to yours, mixed with the others that you described that had already kind of embraced that lifestyle and were there to get recharged or whatever the case might be. But what was it like when you got there, and how can you describe that experience for me?
Yeah, wow, I haven't thought about that for a really long time. I think it was that there was no sense that they were trying to fix anything. They did a really good job, Deepak and his team. And in fact, there were two other people there, Dr. David Simon, who was the co-founder of the Chopra Center, and another person who's an amazing mentor and has become actually a really good friend of mine, David G., who's a meditation master, among other things. And what they really were able to do is they really held a space for you to kind of have your own little experience. And there was several hundred people there. So it wasn't like it was a room of 10 of us. And I think that's really what I most noticed was that I thought I was going to go and somebody was going to fix me, which probably would have been so much easier if somebody else could have done it for me.
Yep.
But what they did was they held a space for me to start to figure it out on my own. And that's really what I noticed was, hey, isn't somebody going to do something to fix me? Oh, they're not. Oh, this is my journey. I'm not sure I wanted this. Okay, well, I'm here anyway, so I'll just kind of go through this. And literally by the end of the week, I couldn't have imagined a better way to start that journey, to say, hey, you've got yourself here. We hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to get yourself out. So we're going to give you some tools and you're going to make them work for you.
You've already described to some extent what it was like when you got back home and the realization of all of the things that you left were still there. But clearly from what you've described about that moment with your boys, the science experiment, I love that, it had started to weave its way into your experience. And I'm curious about what were some of the things then that followed that allowed you to feel like you were at least making baby steps toward kind of redeveloping yourself or learning to honor yourself more as part of your everyday experience?
Oh, yeah. It's always interesting when you think back, because I kind of wish I would have journaled more about it at the time so I could really go back and see, because I'm the me today looking back and sort of thinking about that. But some of the sort of pragmatic things that I definitely started to develop that helped me were, my meditation practice. So my daily sort of practice of, whether I was following my breath or whatever kind of meditation I was doing. We learned this little practice of asking ourselves 3 questions before we would meditate. And it was always guided or directed to us to not go looking for the answers, but to let them arrive. And if you didn't get an answer, then you should just keep going. But we're just almost like we were planting the seeds of intention out there. And those questions were, who am I? What do I want? And how can I serve? From a place of, I've taken care of myself, what's my unique gift that I can serve the world with? And the first time I asked myself those questions, I thought, who am I? I'm Amanda Weber. I'm mom of 2. And what do I want? A new car would be really great right now because mine is falling apart. How can I serve? Which meal? Breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Like, that's literally how I was answering the questions. And then I'm like, oh, Amanda, can't you just dig a little bit deeper? But that was part of the journey, was asking myself those questions every day and just seeing how the different answers that bubbled up, and how as I continued to be present and continued to, read self-help books, and instead of watching Law and Order on the TV, I would, watch something else that was, maybe a little bit more about taking care of myself versus escaping, and those kinds of things. Those were really the first early tools I did, because I certainly couldn't have afforded the time or the money to go back to the Chopra Center, 2 or 3 times a year. So I really had to develop some of those tools on my own.
What was the timeline then, Amanda, from there where things began to change in your professional life?
Oh, yeah. So this is actually kind of interesting. When I started showing up in a way that was more authentic to me, and started really liking myself a lot more, a couple years passed, and I ended up meeting my partner today, and he didn't have any kids. And so even though my boys, I guess, would have been 18 and 20, because they're now 22 and 24. When they were 18 and 20, or 16 and 18, sorry, he said, I'd really like to have a baby. And I said, well, I've kind of done that. I'm not sure if I can do that again. And we were lucky enough that I got pregnant and had my daughter. And so she's 6 now. And according to my older boy, she gets the really good quality parenting. I don't know. I guess, birth order is a thing, and she picked to be last. So, but what I noticed was, when I was pregnant with her, I was pretty sure I was going to have a hard time going back to the busyness of my work and traveling and all that kind of stuff. And so, now maternity leaves in Canada are a year, and being out of my career for a year, things change significantly. The tech sector moves really quickly. Yeah. And so they had kind of a different role planned for me to go back, and it wasn't really something I felt I could be successful at. And so my husband said to me, you've been doing this meditation stuff. Everybody calls you and asks for help with their stress. Why don't you think about doing this for a living, like being a consultant or something with this? And so I thought, oh yeah, I think I can do that. And so it really started on mat leave with my daughter, where I really started hunkering down and working on certifications and things so that I could actually show up and do this as a full-time gig, so to speak.
Tell me more about that then. Once you decided that was the route that you were going to go, what were some of the things that you had to figure out to get started?
Well, the first thing I had to figure out was, what do I need in order to say that I could be a coach or a workshop facilitator or whatever. And so I went actually back to the Chopra Center, where in that period I'd taken one more course with them. So I'd taken 2 kind of retreats or courses with them, if you will. And I called them and I said, hey, I know you guys do like a teacher certification kind of thing. Can you tell me a bit about that? And they said, well, it's a year-long process. It's affiliated with the University of San Diego, and there's a couple prerequisites that you need to take. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I have the time to kind of do all of that. And they said, oh, well, we're just looking here. It's funny, the 2 courses that you've taken with us already are the prerequisites. And I heard these angels singing from behind me. Like, if this isn't a sign, then I don't know what is. Yeah. And so I ended up engaging with them and their teacher certification. So that was the first thing I did. And I actually thought that I was just going to teach people how to meditate. So that's what I started the process of, I think I went there once, and there was a lot of online study, and, it was kind of, a lot of it was done virtually. And I remember bumping into somebody shortly after I got certified in that, when I was getting ready to be a meditation coach, which is what I thought I was going to be. And I bumped into someone and they said, oh, you're not in the tech sector anymore. We heard you got into mediation. That would be so great for you, because you were always so good at making sure that everybody got along. That was my old people pleaser persona. And I said, no, it's not mediation, it's meditation. And they were like, oh. Awkward silence. And I mean, it crushed my ego. I'm like, oh, what am I thinking? Who teaches meditation? Seriously, Amanda? Like, this guy thought you did mediation, and that was admirable and a great career. Meditation, he went running the other way. He didn't even want to finish the coffee with you.
Yeah.
And so you get that self-talk thing going on. But you know what? I just decided I was going to persevere. I kept seeing that picture of my kids, the older boys, saying, you know, that kind thing to me of, you're not yelling at us anymore. And I'm like, nope, I got to do this, because there's other people out there, excuse me, that are probably yelling at their kids too, or doing other stuff that they don't want to do. I need to do this. And so, I did my certification through the Chopra Center. And I really just became a student of getting to know myself. And really that is the best sandbox to play in, is getting to know yourself. Not when you're wonderful and you show up in a wonderful way, but when you're when life gets messy, that's the best sandbox to figure that stuff out in.
I'm curious, just as kind of a quick diversion, if it even is, where you just brought your kids up again really quickly, that as this evolution is taking place, what do you remember about communicating with them and maybe what their thoughts were at that time? If that even happened at all.
Yeah, so a few years after it started, I mean, I think the boys knew that, they knew that their dad wasn't around. They knew that my dad wasn't around. They knew the bills were getting paid, so they sort of, I think, were with me in those early days of getting to really know who I was. But one thing that my one son said to me a couple years into that was, he said, there's a couple things that I really love about what you're doing now, meaning this new career that I do now. And he said, the first thing is that you don't really tell my friends that you meditate, because it's kind of weird and we don't really know what it is, but it just seems kind of strange. And the other thing is that now that you own your happiness, I don't feel guilty being happy around you. And I thought, oh my gosh, like all that time I spent people pleasing and being a martyr and trying to be Wonder Woman, I was unhappy, and they were limiting their happiness around me because they felt guilty being happy when I was like depleted and run ragged. And I never ever thought that would be a consequence of me trying to be all things to all people, that I actually was a burden. Essentially, I was a burden on them.
When going back to what you shared with me just a moment ago, Amanda, of becoming a student, of getting to know yourself.
Yeah.
That there's a great example that you just now shared of how so many of us are going through our lives doing our best, working hard and doing what we think we're supposed to be doing. And in some cases we're right. And in a lot of other cases, unless we can become those students like you of really getting to know yourself, it's difficult, if not impossible, to understand the incredible influence that we wield on the people around us, up to and including some of the people that we care about the most, sometimes without even uttering a single word. It's really astounding once you catch on to that, isn't it?
It truly, truly, truly is. Especially the people you love the most. I feel like, we make a ripple with every choice and decision and thought we have, but it's the people that we love. And it's also, and maybe you connect with this because you have younger kids.
Yep.
You just never intend for anything but the best for them. And you never even think that you maybe, as a consequence of you not being happy, that they will pick up on that. It's more, is there a healthy lunch in their backpack? Are they getting to play the sports they want to play? Did Santa, bless the Christmas tree with stuff that'll make them feel like everything's okay? You don't really think your self-care plays a part in that.
Yeah, my two kids are my biggest cheerleaders. And they're watching their
Yeah.
dad go through a reinvention and
Mm.
not to get too far in having it about me, but just in the spirit of sharing that for me,
Yeah.
when I went through separation and eventual divorce, I was stuck on, I was the fixer. I could, if there's a wall, push it down. If there's a problem, solve it, suck it up, keep moving. That was the paradigm that I thought I was supposed to operate with. And so even when it became, it was brought to light to me that my wife at the time was involved in another relationship and things were seriously broken, the only thing I could think of, Amanda, was fix it. And the only thing that fix it meant was keep the family together, because anything else is a failure to her, to me, and certainly to the boys. And I tried, and in that several months began the seeds of some learning that I am just so unimaginably grateful for now.
Oh, yes.
But it wasn't until probably the same source that, you know, sent you to Chapters or made you go to Carlsbad or whatever it was, hit me with this bolt that said, Kevin, maybe it's a better lesson for your boys to see that sometimes life doesn't go the way that you think it's supposed to go, but when that happens, you can still hold your head up and you can make the best of the situation, and you can treat people up to it, including and maybe even especially the people that you perceive to have hurt you the most, with kindness and compassion. And I can tell you unequivocally, Amanda, that was not a thought that could have come from my consciousness, from my experience to that point. But that's sort of the North Star that I followed. And what ended up, we were always close, but nothing like what we've become in the last 5 or 6 years. And back to the point of becoming a student of yourself and your experience and wielding the influence, I'm amazed at how I don't even need to say a thing to have a really heavy effect over how my two kids are thinking and feeling. And I don't know that a lot of us ever even really stop to think about it, although I'm guessing that once people realize that that's there to be thought about and aren't really quite sure exactly where to start, are the kinds of people that land across your desk now.
It's so true. And, you know, how you say that without really saying anything, I actually think that we really say more when we don't say anything at all, that they're just watching us navigate life. And yeah, I kind of got goosebumps when you said that, just because I'm kind of hanging out in such a space of gratitude that you had that experience for your life and trajectory, and that I had that experience for my life and that trajectory, and how, you know, both of our stories have some similar stuff going on, in that once you've had that experience, you would love nothing more than to facilitate that door opening for somebody else, because you know how amazing it can feel.
That brings us back to where we were then a couple of moments ago, of you trying to uncover what this looks like. Here now you've got a young daughter at home, and you've got a new business that's becoming to be. I'm wondering if you even thought of it as a business at that point, of even just trying to decide what it was that you were going to be doing, a meditation coach and whatever else. How did things start to settle into some sort of an actionable idea?
Well, I think one thing that I'm really good at is making lists and getting stuff done. I used to do it probably for all the wrong reasons, to impress everybody else. But when it was like a internal driven passion for me, the to-do lists were pretty easy to get done. I think I started with a blog and just kind of sharing my experiences. And then I started connecting with a couple people that, you know, I think I talked to some folks that were teaching yoga, and they thought, oh, maybe you could do some meditation. And then I just, you know, I bump into people and I talk about it. And it's funny, it seemed to kind of take on a life of its own without me really having to push it. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I guess I'm just kind of perplexed now. I don't know how it's people say, oh, wow, you like now you're doing all these different things. And I'm like, yeah, but it's funny when you're driven through passion, it seems to just be so much easier.
It's interesting how things evolve organically like that. And because we want to, and I'm pausing here deliberately because I'm realizing that I'm actually trying to prompt you to slap a label on it, which I'm.
Why don't you do the slapping?
Well, who I'll slap is myself because, we race to do that, whether it's checking something off a list so that we can get that momentary buzz of, validation. I did that. Never minding whether that was a really impactful thing that was going to serve us going forward or whether it was just a dopamine rush or to, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Or just basically what's your label? What does your name tag say? And back to where now I'm flying all over the room again here. Forgive me, but to when you said, well, who am I? Well, I'm Amanda Weber. Well, no, you're not. That's just even that's a label that was put on you. So it's fascinating for me to hear that the whole of your life started to just kind of flower organically up to and including what I guess I'll call your professional working career now is what I'll call, here's the label, a happiness coach. But it sounds as if you kind of arrived at where you are at the time that we're talking, not quite by accident, but certainly just by natural evolution. How fair is that?
Yeah, no, I think it's very fair because the happiness coach piece was really my son saying, this thing that you're doing that's making you happy or it's helping you to be happy is allowing me not to feel guilty being happy. And so I thought, wow, maybe I am a happiness coach. So to some people, they go, oh, happiness coach, that's so funny. Like, do people actually pay you for that? And I'm like, whoa, dude, take a seat. Like, this is big. This happiness thing, what you really want is contentment. But if you call yourself a contentment coach, nobody rings you. But happiness, like people are shooting for that. And it's not as easy as buying yourself a nice car. And, this is an inside job. And so what I found was through my own journey and through the people that I work with, once we do some kind of meditation or learn how to be present, then the real work starts, right? That's where all of a sudden when you can get a little bit still with yourself, that's when you notice, that you have a lot of negative self-talk or that you're not taking very good care of yourself or that, you're reactive in certain situations. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, I only teach the meditation piece. I don't know where to send you for that stuff. So I just started becoming a student of it again and kind of adding to what I did. And so I think that's how it's all kind of blossomed. I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but that's sort of what's gone on.
I think it does, and thank you for that. And so from there, I'm curious to take it kind of to the next level in terms of, let's suppose that I ring your line or I send you an email. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me about sort of the kinds of processes, the things you hear, the circumstances that prompt people to reach out to you, and what are some of the things that happen that's sort of part of what you do with people?
Yeah, so my business is sort of divided into two areas. And one area is what I would call my speaking and my workshop facilitation. And a lot of that is done in corporate settings, not unlike where I worked for 17 plus years, where I'll do workshops on how to get good at stress, which is such a great topic these days because I feel like I can show up to speak anywhere from, a bank on Bay Street in Toronto to a spa in the city where I live. And I can say to the group in front of me, whether it's 4 or 100 people, how many people have stress. And everybody puts their hand up because it's such a universal thing. So it could be everything from that to people calling me for one-on-one coaching. where they're a lot like me, where they'll say, on paper, my life looks pretty good. I feel so guilty, but I'm not happy. And I'm like, oh, and they're like, you're a happiness coach. So I was wondering if you could coach me into happiness. I'm like, well, we're going to call it a happiness coach, but we're probably going to do a bunch of stuff that doesn't seem like that, but we're going to get there. And I think the biggest thing that I maybe feel compelled to share is that often people will call me when they are in pain. You asked me about what the pain was, and I said, I think it's shame. People will call me when they're in pain, and they'll want to get together once for an hour to talk, and then the pain will be alleviated a little bit, and then they want to go away and get back to the business of life. This isn't a one-shot deal, as you probably well know. This is a journey, and I'll be a part of their journey, and their books will be a part of their journey, and their life will be a part of their journey. But when you get a taste of wanting to feel better and happier and fuller, it really becomes what you do in many aspects of your life.
What's it like, Amanda, now when you come across somebody like that and because of your very personal experience, you described earlier on about the layers and you're just uncovering all this stuff, which is really going to be, I think, a forever process once you start into it. But that that's what's going to happen, and that you were at a point where, okay, well, now I'm just going to go and look for a fix. That's not what you said, but I think you know what I'm getting at here.
Definitely,
and then somebody lands in your lap, and they're kind of at that point that similar to where you were then, and you now know this person, there's really a journey in front of them. And I just wish I could share all of the perspective that I've gained with them now, but I know that it doesn't work, that they're going to have to, or work like that. They're going to have to invest in a bit of a journey here for it to unfold for them, however that's meant to be. But what's that like from your side of the table as you sit now?
It's amazing in that I know if they stick with it, that with baby steps, that they're going to have some aha moments, which are just such gifts, because it's like they keep you in the game of wanting to learn more. And so I have, probably 5 or 10 of my own stories that I share with people as a tool to hopefully have them go, oh, and have maybe a little aha moment of their own. And I think originally I might have said I'm a sparker of aha moments. And that's really what I try to do. Like, I try to offer some tools and perspective to look at life and its experiences in new and more nourishing ways. So that idea of life isn't happening to you, life is happening for you. I try to find examples of that, because that I find is what will spark in people the idea of, oh, okay, I'm onto something here. And to get to see them hit those little milestones of having those aha moments is, honestly, I wouldn't even need to get paid for what I do, except that I do have bills to pay. But if I didn't, it's such an amazing thing to see people do that. And I'm sure you see it in your work too, where someone will come up to you and say, wow, you said that, and that totally struck a chord for me.
When you do something like that, you're adding so much more value back to that person and what they're going to be able to manifest and translate into their lives, and therefore show up in a way that's going to be better for all of those people around them as well. That similar to what we talked about, that there's far more value there than in what they're paying you or any kind of monetary satisfaction. So hopefully you've done enough of the work to feel good about that. You're just joking. I know you're just joking about that now. But before we wrap up, tell me about one of those times, or just one that maybe immediately comes to mind, of somebody, without naming any names, but maybe just describing an experience where they did come to you and they were in a bit of a bad way, but then did do the work, and what happened after that.
Okay, so I'll preface this with, I get quite emotional when I talk about people that I work with making shifts. So I'm gonna try to remain professional here.
All right.
But if you hear my voice start to crack, because I never really know it's coming. I had one person that came to me, and she is, I'll say, just because I think it speaks to her personality type a little bit, she is a CA, a chartered accountant. So she's quite organized, methodical, checks and balances. There's no gray areas. It goes in the right column or the left column. Everything balances at the end. And she said, I've heard a few people talk about what you do, and I think I might like to get in on it. She said, could I coach with you? And so I said, like an hour, maybe once every week or two. She's like, oh, no. I need like a boot camp. Can I see you for like 8 days in a row? And I'm like, whoa, okay. My husband's an accountant, so I kind of get how she's wired. And I'm like, sure. So we did a boot camp. And we met for 8 days, and we got through a lot of stuff. But as you probably know, it's some of the integration with the teachings. It just takes time. You can't take a drink from a garden hose and learn it all.
Yeah.
But I was totally game on, because I thought, this is great. I can talk to somebody, talk my talk for 7 or 8 days in a row. So we learned to meditate and a bunch of other things. And then I kind of sent her, on her way. And she wrote me a note about an email that I often reflect back on. It's probably about 6 months after we finished up. And she said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I took to heart what you said about a gratitude practice. And so she has a son who I think was 9 or 10 at the time. And she said, we every night before bed, we do something called our gratefuls, and we have a little journal that we leave on his nightstand, and we each write something in it that we're grateful for. And then we close our eyes for a couple of minutes and just sit in stillness. And then I kiss him goodnight, and off we go. And she said, I've been grateful for warm blankets and electric fireplaces a number of times over the winter. I have no idea what my son thinks about when he closes his eyes. Maybe he's humoring me. I don't know. But I feel like I'm holding a space for him of stillness that will serve him well as he goes forth in his life. And she said, in fact, the other day I wasn't home, and his dad was putting him to bed, and he had his dad fill out the book, and she kind of laughed. She said, I think he was humored by it. But she said, the time that she connects with her son in that gratitude practice, that's her meditation practice, she said, has just done something for their relationship that she never imagined it could. And she said, I just thought you would want to know that these things that you're teaching are making such an impact on people's lives. And I never, ever would have done this with my son if it hadn't been for you making this suggestion. So thank you so much. And man, if I'm ever having a down day where I wonder, what the heck am I doing, giving up that corporate job for what I do now, stuff like that just tells me, you know what, you are right exactly in the sweet spot of your life where you should be, sister. So keep rocking on.
That's a fabulous story. Thank you for sharing that. And,
you're welcome.
And Amanda, thank you for being so forthcoming with everything that you shared with me today as well. It's just... I don't know what it is, but at least at the time that you and I are having this recording, you and I have both been in these shoes in one form or another, where we're looking for somebody else. And then when we see a bit of a reflection of, you kind of go, oh, if that's been their experience, then maybe I'm not as broken as I thought I was, or at least
yes,
there is a way forward. But that, when you can open up and just be really authentic and share with other people, it's amazing the connection that it creates. And it seems kind of paradoxical, by tearing yourself open and feeling vulnerable and maybe even dumping on somebody. You might think that that's what you're doing, when in fact you're just giving them one of the greatest gifts that you have to give. And that's been the real joy for me with this podcast so far. And I'm just so incredibly grateful to everyone like yourself that would honor me and anybody that's listening with their time, such as what you've done today. And so I look forward to more of these chats down the road, because I know there are a lot more stories to tell. But thank you so much for this time.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Kevin.
You can connect with Amanda online. You can find her at amandameditates.com. All one word, amandameditates.com. You can find and subscribe to her podcast there, or subscribe to her podcast there. It's called The Full Life. You can also find that on SoundCloud. Just go there and search up The Full Life, Amanda Weber, Weber. If you want to connect on social media, on Facebook, she's at facebook.com/Amanda Weber Happiness Coach. On Instagram, her handle is Amanda_meditates. And on Twitter, all one word, Amanda Meditates. And as always, I'll have all those links available in the blog post that goes with the show notes for this episode, which is episode 48. And you can find that at noscheduleman.com. Thank you so much to Amanda for joining me for that. Really enjoyed talking to her and hope that she and I can connect in the future. As a matter of fact, I know that we will, because we're both going to be speaking as a part of the same event coming up here in the middle of June. I'm really looking forward to that. If you enjoyed this episode with Amanda, I think that you'll really like episode 12 with Jason Stevenson. Jason runs Relax Me Online and meditationmasters.tv. His YouTube channel has just clicked over to about 500,000 subscribers, and he is a really kind, wonderful soul, and tells a story of self-discovery in his journey. Not all that dissimilar to what Amanda shared with us. That's in episode 12 of the No Schedule Man podcast. Maybe have a look for episode 26 with Jennifer Farmer, Healing Grief and Loss and Connecting with Spirit. That's a great one you'll like if you liked Amanda's. And also episode 38 with Dr. Carlin Costa, Love Yourself First and Know Your Flow. That was a fun discussion that happened only just a couple of months ago, episode 38 with Dr. Carlin Costa. You can find all of those episodes as well as the complete podcast archive on iTunes or at noschedulemanpodcast.com. In the meantime, you can reach me at kevinbulmer.com. noscheduleman.com will take you to the same place. All my social media channel links are up there on the upper right-hand corner, as is the sign-up for my email list. I'd love for you to keep in touch, and I do hope that you'll join me on this journey, and please add your voice to mine. I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen and to share part of your day with me. I'm really grateful, and hope to have you back with me next week with another guest on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.